Hi there, everybody, and welcome back to Retro Unscripted. This is episode 10. Video games and systems for me are much like mile markers on a highway. And the reason that I consider them that is because with a lot of new video games or new video game systems, when I first played them, they represented certain major events in my life. I'll give you one example. When I got my Commodore VIC-20 for my birthday in 1984, that was my 12th birthday, it was also the only birthday that fell on Easter Sunday. I actually wound up getting an extra big party and extra gifts. It was kind of cool, but it's still one of the things I remember. I remember being extremely excited to have a VIC-20, and I had Omega Race and Gorf as my first two games. And I played the heck out of those until I got my Commodore 64 2 years later. Then, in 1986, I got my Commodore 64 as a graduation from middle school present, and I used that throughout my high school career from 1986 until 1990. So those are a couple examples of signposts where video games or video game systems mark those really important or really significant events in my life as I grew up and beyond. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking a little bit about Outrun. Outrun is a game that I saw at a pizza place in Greenfield, Massachusetts in 1990. At the time, I still didn't have my driver's license. In fact, behind the wheel, I was a nervous wreck. I had my driver's ed and I passed driver's ed okay, but I was still really nervous behind the wheel. I was nervous merging onto freeways. I was nervous backing out of parking spots. And one thing that I really didn't have a good grasp on was taking curves or turns without overcompensating or turning the wheel too much. You see, my only driving experience before driver's ed was playing games like Pole Position that had a dummy steering wheel that you could turn into infinity either left or right. So there really wasn't a lot of give on the wheel, and consequently, I would always cut the wheel too far. I saw a curve coming or a turn coming, and I knew that I had to turn left or right. So through driver's ed, although nothing major happened, then I would spend time in a car with my mom or with my best friend from high school and continue to cut the wheel too far. To the point one day where my best friend from high school, who had been helping me to drive and trying to help me get my license, said, "I can't do this anymore. You really don't understand this whole thing with turns, and we just have to stop before you crash my car." So I was disappointed, but we went to that pizza place after that fateful driving afternoon and happened to cross Outrun. So I had some extra money. I put a couple of quarters into the Outrun machine, and there were a couple of things I noticed before I hit start. The first being that the steering wheel was not like Pole Position. It had more resistance to it, and it had a definitive extreme left and extreme right turn marker or ratio. So that was new. The other thing that was new was, unlike Pole Position, there was actually really cool music that would play in the background. It wasn't the same as having a car radio or a car stereo or cassette player back in those days, but it was still nice to have some music playing while I was driving and kind of take my mind off of being so nervous. So the first time I played the game, I think I got through about 2 checkpoints before I ran out of time. There were some curves that I didn't see coming. I didn't compensate very well, and I didn't play very well. I was still learning the game as I went. But I kept going back to that pizza place after that day, and whenever I had a little bit of extra money, I would put a couple of quarters in and I would see how well I would do. And eventually I got to the 3rd checkpoint, the 4th checkpoint, and then finally I beat the game. And when I beat the game, I had realized that throughout that whole process, I had learned how to compensate for curves or turns a lot better. I wasn't cutting the wheel nearly as much. I was letting the car do all the work, or the steering wheel do all the work, and consequently I wasn't crashing as much. The other things that I had learned was to pay attention to the road further down rather than looking at always exactly what's in front of me, almost like tunnel vision. And I just felt more confident and comfortable as a driver. Granted, it's only a video game, And if you crashed your car, you didn't cause any damage and you didn't kill anyone. But still, I felt less vulnerable. So after I had beaten Outrun, the next day, I called my friend and I said, let's do some more driving. And after a bit of, are you serious? He came by to my house or my apartment where we were living and picked me up, and we went for a drive. And sure enough, I was a lot more confident. We turned the radio on. We took some curves and turns, and I didn't cut the wheel nearly as much. And it felt good. It felt natural. It felt like I had grown up, like I had learned something. And that's something that Outrun had given me that is a greater gift than just being a fun video game, which I've enjoyed for 25 years since, is that it made me comfortable behind the wheel, and it helped me get over some of the anxiety and the fear that I had, in addition to teaching me something that driver's ed, for whatever reason, just failed to cement into my brain. So these days when I put Outrun in, this is on the Sega Classics collection, which is this guy right here, for the PlayStation 2. It's a great collection, by the way, to find, even though some of the games may not be the versions that you like playing, like Golden Axe is pretty bad. But the version of Outrun that's on here is great, and also Virtua Racing on here is pretty good. But when I pop this in and play, and I see whether I can get through all of the checkpoints and finish the game like I did when I was that 17, 18-year-old kid, it just takes me back, and it helps me remember the struggles that I had with driving, and then the relief that I had afterwards. It still took me a little bit of time to get my license after beating Outrun. Unfortunately, my grandmother, who was my sponsor, made the cardinal mistake of correcting me while I was driving, which in the state of Massachusetts, if that happens, they fail you automatically. So I failed twice before I finally did pass and get my license in 1991, and I've had it ever since. So that is the story of Outrun. Now, as for the game itself, it's still a lot of fun to play today. It is still very easy to pick up and play. And if you don't have or have access to Outrun on the Sega Classics collection, there are copies of Outrun 2 or Outrun 2006 Coast to Coast for the PlayStation 2 or for the Xbox, which are just as fun to play, and they actually look a little bit better than the original arcade game, have more music selections, more things to do rather than just straight racing, and is a lot of fun. And I can tell you that the PlayStation 2 version of Outrun 2006 is really cheap, so it's a great game to have in your library or your collection, and I do recommend it. So that's Retro Unscripted this time around again. Thank you to Yu Suzuki and to Outrun for helping me learn how to drive and doing it without being a complete idiot. Until the next time, thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next Retro Unscripted. Take care.